Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Make It Thrive, the Company Culture podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Rob Baker. Rob is a specialist in bringing positive psychology to life within organizations. He is the founder and chief positive deviant of Tailored Thinking, a pioneering evidence-based positive psychology, well-being and HR consultancy who were named the UK's HR Consultancy of the Year 2020 by the CIPD. Rob is a TEDx speaker, author of Personalisation at Work, and chartered fellow of the CIPD and the Australian HR Institute. He is world leading when it comes to enabling and encouraging job crafting and personalised people experience. And his work, ideas, and research has been presented at academic and professional conferences around the globe. I am so honoured to have Rob join us on this season. His work is truly inspirational, and just listening to him, I know that you are all going to take so much from this conversation. So let's really kick this season off in style. Hi, Rob, and welcome to Make It Thrive, the Company Culture podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And also have to thank you as well for actually taking some time out after coming back off holiday straight into podcasting. I mean, if there was a way just to dive straight in after your holiday, this is the way to do it. So I'm really grateful that you've found some time for me after your holiday.
Oh, I'm not talking. You'll get my fresh take. It'll be interesting actually to see whether my kind of responses to your question are shaped by the fact that I've not been thinking about work day in day out for the last 2.5 weeks. So yeah, I'm interested. I've been, but it's always exciting to talk about these kind of things.
Yeah.
So definitely a pleasure.
Maybe I'll get some more philosophical answers out of you today then.
Who knows? That's how I'm interested. I don't know myself, so we'll find out.
So one thing I really wanted to talk to you about today, Rob, is job crafting. So some people might never have heard of this term. They might think, what on earth is this? So can you introduce us to what this is?
Yeah, sure. So job crafting is the kind of a technical academic term for a process of really personalizing our work. So it's around making small changes to how we act, interact, and think about our jobs to make it more in service of us as individuals. So, right, one thing that we all have in common as humans is that we're all unique, we're all different. And often when it comes to workplaces, we kind of give people the same jobs and ask people to do things in the same way. And we don't tap into our individual differences, our individual strengths, our individual talents. And job crafting encourages us to think about and find small ways for us to shape our jobs, to kind of lean into the things that we're good at and like, and maybe dial down the things that we don't like. So that's kind of job crafting in a nutshell. It's around personalizing our approach to work.
Which just sounds so incredible because, like you mentioned there, we do have a tendency to put ourselves in these boxes, and it feels very disjointed sometimes with our own identity. And we're kind of following these labels and these titles that feel very kind of different to maybe who we are. And actually, like you said, crafting it in this way really encompasses us in such a holistic, whole self approach. I absolutely love it. What kind of got you into this realm, really?
So I've been someone who's always been fascinated about kind of psychology and work and what enables people to do their kind of best work at an individual level, team level, and organizational level. And part of my kind of exploration of this included studying for a master's in positive psychology when I was in Australia. And part of the module that we had around a concept called positive organizational scholarship, which is all around great organizations, great kind of teams, was saying, what are some of the things that differentiates people? So one of the concepts that people explore was saying that when people tend to report positive outcomes from a well-being perspective, from a performance perspective, from a career mobility perspective, is when people felt there was a good fit between the jobs and the work they were doing and themselves as an individual, which kind of made complete sense to me. So I remember the kind of we're learning about this and that the job fit, that kind of makes sense. I was ticking that, and then we came on to this idea of saying, and there's things that people can actively do to kind of make that fit a better fit for them, called job crafting. And I'd never heard of this concept before, so I was literally kind of I remember leaning forward in my seat in the lecture theatre, going, "This is just amazing. And it was something, again, I recognised in myself. And often when we talk about job crafting, people kind of recognise elements of it. They've done it before, maybe seen other people doing it, but they didn't know it was a thing. They didn't do it deliberately. They weren't doing it by design. They just kind of did it by accident or because that's who they were. And so Gavin Slemp, the lecturer who introduced job crafting, showed that there had been at that time over 100 peer-reviewed academic papers about this concept, and I'd never heard. And I, someone who's worked in the HR profession, I'd tried to be evidence-based. I'd never heard this idea before. And since then, it's 7 or 8 years since then. There's been over 160 peer-reviewed papers about this. So it's one of the the research behind this is so compelling, but we just didn't know about it. So what I did, kind of pretty much as soon as I heard about this concept, I was like, right, I want to play with this. I want to explore it. So I didn't give anyone. I didn't ask permission to do this, but in my lunch hours, I started designing workshops I was working at the University of Melbourne at the time, for colleagues to come along and to kind of saying, I think my workshop was, do you want to make your work better? Or workshop around making your work better. And I had literally one session, kind of a rocket scientist next to a cleaner, next to a technician, all talking about how they could make their work better. And that was to see whether I could whether there was really relevance about job crafting in the university context, the one I was operating in, and also are there ways that you can encourage people to do more of it? Because that was something that the research had not kind of progressed as much upon. It was like saying job crafting is generally good when it happens, but there'd been less kind of thought or research at that time about making it kind of happen. So I was kind of curious about whether I could kind of do something there, and basically I've never stopped since then. So that was nearly 10 years ago now, and I've been kind of pretty much investigating, exploring, and encouraging and cheerleading people to craft since then.
I absolutely love that, and I think it's so relevant for the time that we're sat in now, when people are, there's this big kind of great resignation going on, and the quiet quitting that's kind of come out recently. There's all of these things where people are kind of like, I'm so bored at work, and we were just dissatisfied, unfulfilled. And we've spent the past 2 years of our lives, we've had that massive moment of reflection where so many people have kind of gone, is this really what I want to do? And there's lots of career moving, so it just couldn't be more relevant.
You're so right, Lizzie. And the research and the research and the quiet quitting is great. I only came across it relatively recently, I think, in a couple of articles, but I kind of like that. But again, it's one of those things that you kind of recognise in yourself or colleagues. Where it's like, I'm now kind of, I've lowered down the tone, turned things down a little bit in terms of my effort and input. And often when I talk about job crafting within organisations, I get people to think about light bulbs above people's heads. So if you think when you join an organisation for the first time, you're quite excited, your light bulb's pretty fully lit, it's kind of bright and you're excited. And then some organisations, your listeners might have kind of been this. I've certainly worked in some where over time your light bulb just gets a little bit dimmer and dimmer and dimmer until it's kind of blinkering and kind of like flickering a little bit. And I think this idea of stopping kind of working kind of internally a little bit, quite quitting, is around your light bulbs just kind of not on. But what I find with job crafting, the way I describe it to leaders, is saying job crafting is something you can do to try and get everyone to turn their own light bulb on. And so it's not, but it's also driven by the individuals. You're not telling someone to do it, you're not forcing them to do it, but it's an invitation to say, how can you make your work better?
Yes. Yeah, and that's the whole point, isn't it? It's that invitation to bring so much more of yourself into work, because we do have this very depleted mindset of, oh, when I go into work, these are only the parts of me that come with me, even though there's so many skills and things that I can do, and so many facets of me that I could bring into the workplace. And I mean, that's one thing that I really embraced when I started Liberty Mind, because there were so many things I could put my skills towards, creating a podcast, writing content, and facilitating sessions. Like, I've never felt more fulfilled in being able to do the things that I love and I enjoy and I can kind of add to. So it's fascinating to really try and get people to think about this really, whole self approach.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing is not, I think the way you've done it, and I really admire the work you've done in Liberty Mind, I think it's fantastic, but you don't need to set up your own company to give yourself that permission. I think what we should be doing in every organisation, you talked about boxes, is saying, how can we invite people to bring a bit more of themselves to the workplace, because we know there's benefits to it. If people share experiences, if people feel that they're not wearing a mask, they can be their authentic selves, then everyone wins, because the employee's more engaged, colleagues probably benefit from those skills that they have. And I think one of the things that job crafting often isn't thought about, but I think it has got a piece of the puzzle when it comes to looking at inclusion or belonging or a diversity and inclusion agenda. You wouldn't necessarily think job crafting is the answer, but job crafting is actually an active invitation for people to say, how can you make your job a bit more you? How can you lean into that strengths and your kind of individuality? And often when it comes to organizations, unfortunately, and I've been part of the problem in HR, is that we treat kind of heterogeneity, we treat diversity as a bit of a threat. Like we don't, if someone else is different, therefore we're going to have to do something different. It's much easier if everyone's the same. Like,
Yeah.
and I think we've got in the habit in the past of designing work and encouraging people to think about work in boxes, in kind of like in uniform ways, and we know that's just not working. That's not flying in the current environment, and we need to do something differently. And I think job crafting invites people to think differently about their work, how they structure work, but also, as you were saying, invites people to bring their whole selves to play at work each day.
Definitely. And like you say, because people, friends often say to me, "Oh, you're so lucky that you run your own business." I mean, don't get me wrong, there are caveats to running your own business, as you know, Rob. As Elizabeth Gilbert always says, there's a shit sandwich to every job, which is so true. But it is, and I think it's really hard, especially for people that have maybe been in the same role for a long period of time, or maybe they've got stuck in being in certain positions. And I have friends who've been somewhere and they're so integrated into the company, they don't really want to leave, but then they're feeling quite unfulfilled, and they'll maybe start doing a bit of a side hustle, because in order to almost scratch that itch, they need to do something else. So they kind of create a side hustle, get a lot of these kitchen table kind of Etsy crafters going on, because again, it's like, how can I fulfill this need that I have, when we could also bring that into the workplace?
Oh yeah, so much so absolutely. I think often we think about, so when I'm introducing job crafting for the first time, one of the things I say in terms of we know that people aren't fully engaged at kind of work, and you've already mentioned about the great kind of resignation or great reflection. There's been a couple of things that have kind of research saying, why is this happening? And number one, often people, when they say they're leaving work or think about leaving work, is pay, which is understandable. But number two was around fulfillment, and number three was around bringing a sense of belonging in terms of what they're doing. And that's been two recent surveys that I've seen come through that. And job crafting and kind of that personalization applies to those kind of two elements. But the reason I think it just people are craving for that, and you've mentioned it with some of your friends, is that we put people in boxes, right? So we kind of, this is your job, this is your defined job, this is your box. You can't play out of that box. Or people don't feel they can play out of that box. They kind of the box. So the only way someone can bring innovation to that role, or kind of shape it or make it more engaging, is by jumping out of that box. So that means either you have your side hustle, so you're adding to it, so you're doing that at a time, or you can jump out of the box completely and go into a new box, by a new job. But actually, and so from an organizational perspective, they're potentially losing someone in that way, because if they're going to go to another job, they feel the only way they can get that new challenge or opportunities by going to a new role. But job crafting, or this mindset around personalization, is saying, well, why can't we just make that your box a bit kind of better fit for you as an individual? So rather than people feeling that there is something missing, it's around saying, well, what can I do to shape it, to improve it? And I think we get so kind of just familiar with doing work in the same way, into the expectations of ourselves and the manager's expectation of us. We don't often have the invitation to think about, what can we do differently? How can we make our job better? And I was running a workshop session with someone recently, and someone had been there for an organization for 10 years, and it was an innovative, positive organization. And they're saying it's the first time I'd ever been explicitly asked, how could you make your job better? And they'd had conversations about performance development, how they're doing, all these kind of things, but never like just the question of going, what can you do, and what can we do to make your existing job even better, and they'd never been on their horizon. And I think we all of us need to have the permission to have that question given to us, and to do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the amount of things that people are maybe holding back on in their workplace environment because they feel like they don't have that permission, in quotes,
Yeah,
to offer up a suggestion or to change the way things are being done. It's just such a brilliant way of kind of opening up this way of working.
yeah. And everyone, if you ask them, everyone's got a list, right? Everyone knows
Yeah.
what they can do. And that's the thing as well. People get scared of asking the question because I was saying, well, what happens if I can't do it? Well, from my perspective, it doesn't kind of. It'd be great if you can, but it doesn't matter because those people are thinking about it anyway, and you're better off understanding your colleague and having an understanding and a compassionate conversation with them, or interesting conversation about what could we do. And if you're working in marketing or working in sales and you don't like updating your customer management system, like, well, that's just tough. Like, chances are they're not going to be able to change that. But there might be other things in your job that you can change, that actually, with a bit of time and a bit of encouragement, that's available to you. And I think just, yeah, we avoid. I don't know why we tend to avoid those conversations because we're a bit worried about the answers we're going to get. And it's. I don't know why. Well, do you know what's your thoughts? Why do we avoid those conversations?
Why do we avoid those conversations? Oh my gosh, where do we even start? I mean, there's so much. I think so many people have different workplace experiences as well. There's
Mm,
huge varieties in the power dynamics that goes on in the
yeah,
workplace. That has huge influence on how people feel that they can sort of step forward and answer those questions. Even down to the levels of psychological safety in the workplace. Is it safe for me to have this conversation
yeah,
with my colleagues and that kind of thing? There are so many, yeah, I would say undercurrents going on in order for us to have
nice.
these, yeah, quite bold conversations. And it's I think it's still something that's a new way of working, isn't it? This
Yeah,
co-creation
yeah,
idea. We're so used to that
yeah.
very top-down, hierarchical, told what we do, just get on and do your job. And now we're kind of stepping into this realm of new ways of working and being a lot more agile and co-creative, that it takes a massive mindset shift more than anything to kind of work in this way.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I love the idea of undercurrents. I haven't thought about that. And different level there'll be, as you all know, sometimes that can change quite
Yeah,
dramatically and have a big impact. So that's kind of really, really interesting. And also it makes me think about an organizationally with the sea and undercurrents. You can be in the same kind of bit of water right relatively close to each other, and the undercurrents can be very different. And that again probably be people's lived experience of work in terms of your manager or leadership. Some teams might be really positive and thriving, others might be toxic, and you kind of see that sometimes as well. And that's really interesting.
yeah.
So I love that. I
Yeah,
love
you
that.
do. It's all those subcultures that happen. Like you say, it's, within a
Yeah,
very large organization, a lot of the time what you have is there can be very empowering, supportive coaching type leadership in some teams
yeah,
where they have a very great amount of safety in order to, challenge each other and have really good conversations and deep and meaningful conversations about their work. And then you've got other teams that are still in this very, you know, I mean, they're so mixed. It's like, someone should create a
yeah.
map where there's like all these different subcultures that goes on, because honestly, it's so crazy the amount of different subcultures that can emerge in a much larger organization. There is.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think there is those informal kind of hierarchies, and often when people say, "When does job crafting not work?" For me, and the only time that I would say that it kind of there is definitely not. I would advise against it is when there isn't the genuine permission and encouragement to be able to kind of to experiment with the job, to talk about agile, to be more iterative in terms of how you're doing. So I have to my cost kind of worked with some organisations. They said we think this is a good thing, go and do it, but the team hasn't been ready or the management hasn't been supportive of it, and actually people have been more frustrated in those circumstances because they're saying with one hand you're saying do this, and with the other I'm being told not to do it, either explicitly or passively aggressively within the workplace to do it, and actually people feel worse in those circumstances because you're getting those kind of mixed messages. So that kind of authentic kind of commitment to it is something that's important, and that's the one thing that I look for. Because in terms of job crafting, often people say, who's this for? What organisations? And I've done it, and I've studied it with kind of cabin crews to CEOs to banking sector to cleaning. It's really agnostic in terms of a concept, but it is. You do need a genuine commitment to allowing people to experiment. It's not a big budget. I talk about 5 minutes a day or an hour a week, but if you haven't got that, if you're in a subculture, as you were saying, where that's going to be not allowed or hijacked in some ways, then that could certainly cause a problem. Something to be aware of.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's I think for you and I both in this area that we work within is really trying to get these organizations to stop seeing it as another tick box exercise to encourage engagement. It's like, right, every 6 months or we're going to do this thing and we're going to, put on. And I think that's the really hard thing is I'm sure you're the same, but you have to have such a deep discovery call with potential clients because you really need to get under the skin to know, okay, are you doing this because there's real motivation to do something that's going to have good impact, or are you just doing it to kind of like tick the box again, try and turn that survey around that's dipped down again recently?
So that's a really interesting reflection. I think it's a real challenge that we have as consultants working in the space and with organizations as well, in the fact that often the way to bring job crafting, I often say bring it to life. So in terms of actually how does this idea permeate, and it doesn't have to be called job crafting, I don't mind, but the idea of bringing personalising work and encouraging people to make their work better actively, which is what I badge as job crafting. So it's how do you bring it to life? And often people say, how do you do this? And they want my kind of like 10-step approach to doing it. And I can do that, but I know that the most effective way of making it stick is by co-creating and by understanding where people are with an organization and meeting them where they are and aligning it with the things that they're doing well already as well. So it's like often, if you've got a check-ins that are working really well, then that's a great point to kind of add it to. But if your check-ins aren't working very well, adding this conversation to it is probably not going to help. Or running workshops when everyone is saying they're tired and overstretched and haven't got capacity. Having a separate workshop, you're saying, how can you make work better? People are like, well, the way you can make better is by not running this workshop and giving them more time. So there is often, I think as consultants, we get given the kind of like, tell us give us the roadmap or the structure and you can do it. And part of me kind of like is always, I don't know how you deal with this. Part of me is like, well, I have got it, but I'd be much rather create the journey with you. But if we do that, we've got to be a bit more open to the fact that we don't know exactly the terrain we're going to navigate or what it's going to look like. And it's probably going to cost you more time, probably financially, but also in terms of energy and time and exploration to do that. And not everyone is in the position to do that either. And that's a challenge. So I think it's a really interesting. Well, do you find that yourself in terms of people that managing that balance between wanting the kind of clear roadmap versus trying to co-create something with organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because it's one of those things where they really want the answers, but the answers are within the group already. And as the coach, because you have the experience of what worked and what hasn't worked, or those kind of things, they try to lean on you too much sometimes in order to give them the answers. And it's really important, like you say, yes, there's a way of doing it, definitely, and there's areas that I could go through, but we don't know, like you say, things can change, things can come up that gets in the way, and we go, oh, hang on a minute, we didn't realize that we need to have a conversation about this because this has all of a sudden come up, and actually it's going to get in the way of us moving forward. And that agile approach is really difficult for businesses to mentally prepare for, because they are so used to that default business plan. This is our 3-month, 6-month, year goal. And even with a pandemic where everything got blown out of the water catastrophically, they're still going, we need a year's plan. Just know that things are just so movable and consistently changing. It's really hard to shift people's mindset in that. Go with the change.
Comfort, isn't it? I think it's comfort. I think it's mindset, but it's not. Again, I think it's often to blame people to say like this is the kind of your fault for not having that mind change. If only you change your mindset, then everything. I think we often, again, from a human-centered approach, we forget that people have just got into deep grooves.
Yeah.
Like I was talking to someone about grooves, and like it's really, really hard to jump out of that. If your needle will go for your record and it keeps going, it's just really smooth and easy, and you know how it works. To get someone to then to change that, where we're kind of not having that framework, we're saying we need to be more innovative, we need to be more agile, we need to be more flexible. When it comes to work, from my perspective, we need to kind of allow people to kind of draw around the edges. People just aren't, they're uncomfortable with that. And I think we can blame people for saying, well, you should just be comfortable. But if that's all they know, and that's how they've been trained, and that's the mindset that's been given to us, it's totally kind of understandable. And I suppose it's our job to kind of coach and encourage them to say, how can we create a new groove? And what's the best way of doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes me think of like the Emperor's got a new groove. Like I can think of some really quirky things now. I've got groove coming into the mix. But it's true. It's I often say, really my role is to be a pathfinder for you, to kind of help you find those paths of where to go next, because it is so easy, and we do it all the time in our lives. We go for the easy thing, the thing that we've always done, but the easy choice isn't the best choice, and that's just what we kind of tend to get wrapped up in.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And so one of the ways I have attempted to kind of change this a little, or challenge it a little bit, or make it more palatable to people, is to do things as experiments. So often when I'm introducing job crafting to people, saying, well, rather than assuming this is going to work or not going to work for you, let's actually run some experiments with you. Because if you run experiments, often it's like it's fixed, it's time bound, and then you collect some data, and then you can make a decision. So we feel that we need to make a decision now for the forever. Yeah. And I think that's often organizationally, we often do that. It comes back to your 12-month, 36-month roadmap. We're going to feel we need to do this for everyone, or we need to do it now. It was actually an experimental approach. Says, well, let's just see, and then we can either rewind it, or dial it up, or dial it down based on the findings. So when I'm working with organizations for the first time, I often say, let's do a kind of cultural fit for job crafting to see whether people like it, and can see whether people can do it through workshops, and then also collect evidence of the types of things people do within that organizational context when they craft their jobs, because it's not the same for everyone. So some teams will do, and some organizations will find different ways to craft their jobs than others. And often it's the things that when I talked about bringing job crafting to life, it's around sharing those stories. It's around giving examples of saying, this is how someone in X team did this, and like, oh, okay, I can do that. I can hold my beer. I can get better. I can do something better than that. So it's around finding ways to kind of get in those stories. So I often encourage people to think about, when I'm looking for these experiments, to test it with 3 different groups. So I look at who are going to be the potential cheerleaders who are going to get it. Often the HR teams, or the marketing, for some reason, they're kind of the people who kind of seem to be more creative and bought into it, so they're probably going to get it. So we'll run some sessions with them. We'll run some with some skeptics. So who are the people who are kind of potentially going to be a bit skeptical and challenging about this? And often it tends to be IT teams or the legal teams. I don't know why, but it just tends to be
compliance focused.
Yeah. Or the financing, and then what's a group we don't know? So who's a set of some colleagues that we just don't know the answer is going to be. And I find those really helpful. To kind of collect some evidence and data to kind of whether it's successful. And again, it's really important we don't say it's a panacea, but I've not come across a group that haven't been able to craft with the right kind of framework and encouragement to do it. But also we kind of collect those stories. And also it's even more powerful organizationally if you can say, wow, have you convinced the IT team? Well, they're saying, if the IT team this is a good thing, then blimey, everyone should will think this is a good thing, So that can be really helpful, but it's a bit scary as well. And the first time I did it, I was like, "Oh, is this a good thing? Am I making life more difficult for myself here in terms of this approach, rather than giving them their 12-point plan?"
Yeah.
I find that for me, kind of such a useful exercise in terms of collecting data, collecting kind of evidence that is working, but also then when it comes to the next stage of saying how can you do more of this, you've also got some groups of people you can call upon to help bring their ideas, because if they're saying, do you find this useful, well, my next question is, how could we do more of it?
Yes.
And that's again can be really 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 simple stuff, but if you haven't got those experiences, if you're doing things in isolation, it's really really hard to get to that
Yeah,
data.
definitely. That is such great insight, Robin. I love the way you've said, to experiment, because that is something that can easily, come up with organizations, is it feels like they have to commit to some really big, lengthy project, and it can feel really overwhelming,
Yeah,
and they're wondering who's going to get involved. But coming at that kind of innovative approach of, well, let's play with this first, and
yeah,
then see what
yeah.
happens. It kind of puts everyone else at ease, that there's not so much pressure on it.
Yes, and I think also it can be really helpful for those for people who are trying to convince leaders to kind of do something that maybe is outside their comfort zone that you've talked about beforehand. If you say put that badge of experiment around it, it's more likely to be kind of tactically, it can be helpful in terms of getting their buy-in. And I find this experimental mindset helps when it comes to job crafting as well, because I often encourage people to think about not. You can say to someone, "How do you think you can make your job better?" But you may not be right, right? We don't know until we try. So often I encourage people to think about running an experiment. So if I was to do a session with someone, and people listening to this call, excuse me, can be can do this yourself, in terms of saying, if I was to invite you to make your job better next week, for the next week, and I gave you a budget of 5 minutes a day or an hour a week, what's an experiment you could run? What's something you can do, and just reflect on that.
Mm,
Um, and I find that again quite helpful, rather than people feeling again that playful mentality, rather than it being another thing to do. I've got a job craft as well as doing everything else. It's like, well, no, let's run this as an experiment and see if it works well. And sometimes you'll be surprised. So I've run sessions with people where they've done something. Recently someone said, I want to stop, I'm doing too much work in the evenings. Um, and so what I'm going to do is I'm not going to check my email now from the evening. I'm going to have a really clear position, and logically it makes complete sense. It works really well. But what actually happened for that person was that because they got so used to, come back to this idea of a groove, I suppose, that we've talked about. They got so grooved that they got really anxious about kind of not checking emails, and they didn't manage it well, and they did get overburdened, and it kind of got messy. So they realised that was actually too big a step for them, although it's maybe where they want to get to. It was like much healthier for them to have clear lines of saying Mondays and Fridays I don't do it. Like that's fine, and then I pick up Wednesday, Thursday, Wednesday. And I'm not advocating people do their email in the evenings if that doesn't work for them. But what that person found was that if they were too ambitious, their experiment actually went in a different direction
yeah.
than they thought. And I think that often, if you don't have that experimental mindset, you would be like, that didn't work. I tried to stop doing my emails in the evening and that didn't work. But if you're curious about it, if you do it kind of actively, then you can learn and adjust, and be more agile and more iterative, as you talked
Yeah,
about.
absolutely. Oh my gosh, Rob, you've given us so much wisdom and insight. This is such a juicy episode, and I know that the people listening will be probably hopefully taking feverishly lots of notes about everything that you've shared, because this is such another just great way of working differently and approaching work in a whole new light. I mean, yeah. So I'm going to make sure that obviously all of your details are in the show notes, but I thought I'd add a bit of fun into this season. So I've got a quick fire round if you're up for it, Rob.
Yeah, do it. Let's do it.
So the first question is, song or playlist that makes you instantly feel good?
Oh, okay. So I don't know the name of the song, but there's a band called Screaming Maldini who was based in Sheffield, and although the name of the song is Always Summer Sometimes, and it was I I discovered it because it was a trailer to a film festival, and whenever I put it on, I still remember watching the film for the first time, and I get kind of like um, the hairs in the back of my neck kind of stayed on it, and it always switches my mind, and I always get frustrated by the fact that it changes my mindset, how vulnerable I am to music as a human being. But I love it. I love it. So song for me.
Yeah. Oh, I'll have to find that one. I'm going to have to search that
Yeah.
out on Spotify. Thanks for that, Rob. A book or podcast that changed your life?
Oh wow. So this isn't very quick fire. Please, sorry, listeners. I'm reflecting on this. I would say podcasts have changed. I wouldn't say a podcast. I'd say podcasts have changed my life. And I think I've got a really nice set of 5 or 6 work kind of geeky podcasts that I listen to. And I would say that they give me lots of fuel for kind of trying new things and picking up new things. So, and a couple out there just in terms of Brave New Work, which I really enjoy, Leadomorphosis, which is really good. Adam Grant's kind of TEDx kind of podcast. There's loads of, I know they're all, and I change for me, but I would say podcasts rather than books. And then I find authors, when they've been interviewed on podcasts, they give you the best bits of their book often,
So true.
in like a half-hour chat. Then you have to kind of go through the. I enjoy going through the book, but it's like you can get the key takeaways in that half an hour conversation.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's so many podcasts I've listened to with authors where I'm like, that wasn't in the book. That's so fascinating. Why wasn't that bit in the book? The best advice you've ever been given, Rob?
The best advice I've ever been given. It changes every day. So I'm trying to think about. There's always a couple of leaders that I've admired, and one thing would be, if it goes wrong, it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't really matter. And I think often when I'm doing things, because I'm so involved in the work that I'm doing, I bring high stakes to it. But the reality is, the stuff that I'm doing, no one's gonna die if it goes wrong. And I think it's like sometimes also it can hold me back from doing experimenting, like the way I've said to you about kind of organisation, taking some risks. So in terms of, if it goes wrong, it doesn't really matter. And I think that can be really helpful to me to kind of navigate decisions and decision making, and it's easier said than done. So I'm not saying I've got that nailed, but I do often come back to kind of that sentence. And there's a guy called Tony Payne who kind of gave that to me.
Oh, I love that. I'm definitely gonna put that one on my post-it notes above my desk, because I'm exactly the same. I commit so much to it. I get so emotionally involved.
Yeah. We've got high stakes. I don't think it's helpful sometimes. It's good to have that level of commitment.
Yeah.
That's what people would really value in you, Lizzie,
Yeah.
as a consultant. But it's, at the same time, I think it can paralyze us a little bit as well.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, completely relate to that. One of your bucket list items, Rob, that you are yet to tick off?
Oh, okay. So one of the things that Claire and I, we're getting to an age now, my wife and I, we're thinking about what we're going to do in the future, what matters. We're talking about in holiday, so this is a reflection on like what matters to us. And we're like, well, holidays matters. Those are great, aren't they? We should do more of this. And one of the things that it's really central to me is around having a sense of adventure and doing adventurous things. And so we would love to, there's a trail that I can't remember the specific name of it now, others will be able to remember it, that goes from the north to south tip of New Zealand. And we'd love to kind of, in our lifetime, to have completed that. Now, whether that's one in one go, like which will take months, or whether that's multiple visits to do it, but that's something that we're kind of like saying that's something that we would love to do. So that's definitely on the bucket list, and it will literally, the way we're talking about it, would be towards the end of the bucket list, I suppose. But that's something we'd love to do.
Oh, that sounds amazing. New Zealand's on my bucket list. It really is. It just looks such an incredible place. So yeah, oh my gosh, that's definitely given me some inspiration. And the last one is, if you could create a placard for a public protest, what would it be?
So my probably today, to think about, so it's in terms of, I'd probably say embrace our humans' messiness, or something like that. So in terms of and this comes back to organisationally rather than like broader societal political issues. Like, I think it's linked to it, is the fact we expect everyone to act rationally, and we expect ourselves to act rationally, and we get frustrated when people don't do this. But the reality is we're all messy, we're all individual, and it comes back to the centre of our hearts. And I think we need to design and embrace that messiness rather than kind of fight against it. And I often feel as individuals, as people, we aren't curious enough about or embrace our messiness. So maybe probably embrace our messiness would be the thing that I would put on my placard today.
I love that. Amazing. Oh, thank you so much, Rob. I could have chatted to you for hours. It's been such a joy. Like I've said to the audience, I will make sure that everything of where to find you is in the show notes, including your amazing TED Talk as well, because that's definitely worth watching, everyone. So yeah, thank you so much, Rob. It's been an
Thank you.
pleasure.
It's been really fun. So thanks so much.
You've been listening to Make It Thrive, the Company Culture Podcast.